Story 1. Casey Marie Anthony was born on March 19, 1986, in Warren, Ohio. Her father, George Anthony, worked in law enforcement. Her mother, Cindy Anthony, worked as a nurse. She had an older brother named Lee. When Casey was still young, the family moved from Ohio to Florida. They settled in Orlando, where Casey would grow up. From an early age, Casey lived in a house with her parents and her brother. Her father was often working, and her mother was described by people who knew them as someone who tried to keep the family looking normal. Casey attended local schools in Orlando. During her teenage years, friends and classmates noticed that she sometimes told stories that were not true. She would say she had done things or met people that did not match the facts. At the time, those around her thought of it as exaggeration or a habit of lying to make her life seem more interesting. Casey did not finish high school in the traditional way. Instead, she earned her GED. After that, she found work at Universal Studios in Orlando. She worked there for a period of time, and she told people she had a job in the events or entertainment part of the park. In 2004, she became pregnant. Her daughter, Kaylee Marie Anthony, was born on August 9, 2005. Casey was 19 years old. After Kaylee was born, Casey stopped working at Universal Studios. She had taken maternity leave and never returned. She did not tell her family that she had left the job. Instead, she continued to let them believe she still worked there. Casey and Kaylee lived with Casey's parents, George and Cindy, in their home on Hope Spring Drive in Orlando. Casey did not pay rent. Her parents covered the household bills, and they helped care for Kaylee while Casey came and went as she pleased. In the years after Kaylee's birth, Casey developed a social life that revolved around friends she had met through school or through her boyfriend at the time. She would often go out in the evenings and leave Kaylee with her mother or father. People who knew Casey during this period noticed that she continued to tell lies about small things. She told friends she had jobs that she did not have. She told her family she was working at Universal Studios when she was not. She also told her mother that she had a nanny who watched Kaylee while she was at work. The nanny's name she gave was Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. In truth, no such nanny ever watched Kaylee. Casey's relationship with her mother, Cindy, was complicated. They argued often. Cindy wanted to know where Casey was and what she was doing with Kaylee. Casey would give answers that later turned out to be false. Her father, George, was less involved in the day-to-day arguments but was present in the home. Casey's brother Lee had moved out of the house by then, but stayed in touch with the family. In early 2008, Casey was not employed. She did not have a steady income. She sometimes took money from her parents or from her grandparents without telling them. She also wrote checks from her mother's bank account without permission. Her mother discovered this later and was angry, but the family did not involve the police. Instead, Cindy tried to keep track of Casey's spending. Casey spent time with a new boyfriend she had met. His name was Tony Lazaro. She often stayed at his apartment. During this time, she told Tony that she worked at Universal Studios and that she had a nanny for Kaylee. She did not tell him that she was living with her parents or that she had no job. She also told her friends that she was employed and that her life was stable. By the spring of 2008, Casey's pattern of lying had become well known among her family and close friends. Her mother had caught her in many lies about work, about the nanny, and about where she went during the day. Still, no one in the family took legal action. They continued to let Casey and Kaylee live in the house. Cindy continued to watch Kaylee when Casey was out. Casey's behavior in the months before June 2008 showed that she was spending more time away from home. She often told her mother she was taking Kaylee to the nanny. Then she would go to her boyfriend's apartment or out with friends. She did not seem to be looking for a job. Her mother grew frustrated, but did not stop her. The last time anyone in the family saw Kaylee with Casey was on June 16, 2008. On that day, Casey left her parents' home with Kaylee. She told her mother she was taking Kaylee to the nanny. That was a normal kind of statement for Casey to make, even though the nanny did not exist. From that point forward, the events that would later become the center of a criminal case began to unfold. But those events belong to the next part of the story. On June 16, 2008, Casey Anthony left her parents' home on Hope Spring Drive in Orlando with her daughter, Kaylee. Kaylee was 2 years old. Casey told her mother, Cindy, that she was taking Kaylee to a nanny named Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. This nanny did not exist. Casey had used this lie many times before to explain where she went during the day. On this day, however, Kaylee did not return home. What happened to Kaylee on June 16th was not witnessed by anyone else. Later evidence would show that at some point that day Kaylee died. Her body was placed in a trash bag. The bag also contained a blanket. Duct tape was placed over the lower part of Kaylee's face. The exact manner of death was never determined, but the child's remains were not reported missing for weeks. After Kaylee's death, Casey did not call the police. She did not tell her parents. Instead, she continued her daily life as if nothing had happened. She kept Kaylee's body in the trunk of her car, a silver Pontiac Sunfire that she drove. The body remained in the trunk for a period of time. During those days, Casey visited her boyfriend, Tony Lazaro, and stayed at his apartment. She went out with friends. She told no one that Kaylee was missing or dead. On or around June 18th or June 19th, Casey went to her parents' house while they were not home. She took a shovel from the family's backyard. She left the shovel behind her car. Her neighbor later saw the shovel leaning against the car and moved it back to the yard. Casey did not use the shovel to bury Kaylee at that time. Instead, she continued driving with the body in the trunk. In the days that followed, a strong odor began to come from the trunk of Casey's car. People who later saw the car noticed the smell. Casey did not explain the smell. She kept the car parked in different locations. At one point, she parked it at a friend's apartment complex. The car sat there for several days. On June 24, 2008, Casey went to a Blockbuster video store with her boyfriend. She rented movies. She also went to a tattoo parlor with friends and got a tattoo on her upper back that read Bella Vita, Italian for beautiful life. She paid for the tattoo using money she had taken from her mother's bank account without permission. Around this same time, Casey began telling people that Kaylee was with the nanny. She told her boyfriend that Kaylee was with a nanny named Zani while she visited him. She told her friends the same story. When her mother called her phone to ask about Kaylee, Casey said Kaylee was at the nanny's house, or at a park, or with friends. Each time her mother asked, Casey gave a different answer. Casey also wrote letters and made entries on her social media pages. She did not mention Kaylee. She wrote about her boyfriend, her plans, and her life. She acted as though she did not have a child to care for. By late June, the odor from Casey's car had become very strong. On June 27, 2008, Casey's car ran out of gas on the side of the road. She left the car there. A friend came to help her push the car to a nearby parking lot, but the car remained there. Casey did not retrieve it. She told her boyfriend that her car had been stolen. On June 30, 2008, Casey's mother Cindy called her repeatedly to ask where Kaylee was. Casey told Cindy that she had been trying to reach the nanny but could not. She said Kaylee was in Tampa with the nanny. Cindy later drove to Tampa to look for them, but did not find anyone. For the next 2 weeks, Casey avoided her parents. She stayed at her boyfriend's apartment. When her mother called, she made excuses. She said she was working at Universal Studios, even though she had not worked there for years. She said she was traveling. She said she was busy. She did not go home. Meanwhile, Casey's abandoned car sat in the parking lot. On July 15, 2008, the car was towed to an impound lot because it had been left there too long. The tow yard manager called the Anthony home to notify them that the car had been impounded. Cindy Anthony took the call. She realized Casey's car had been found. She then drove to the impound lot with George Anthony to pick it up. When George arrived at the tow yard, he opened the driver's side door. A strong smell came out of the car. The tow yard manager smelled it too. Both men believed the smell was like that of a dead body. George opened the trunk. Inside the trunk was a trash bag containing some trash, but there was no body. The car smelled strongly, but the trunk was otherwise empty. Cindy Anthony, now worried, drove to Casey's boyfriend's apartment. She found Casey there. Cindy demanded to know where Kaylee was. Casey told her mother that Kaylee was still with the nanny. She said Kaylee was safe. She said she had been trying to find the nanny for days. Cindy did not believe her. She insisted that Casey tell her the truth. Casey did not change her story. Cindy then took Casey back to their home. Once inside, Cindy continued asking where Kaylee was. Casey gave more lies. She said the nanny had taken Kaylee. She said the nanny lived in an apartment at a specific address. Cindy and George then drove to that apartment address with Casey. When they arrived, the apartment was empty. It had been vacant for months. There was no nanny and no Kaylee. The family returned home. Cindy then called 911 for the first time. She told the dispatcher that her granddaughter had been missing for 31 days. She said her daughter's car smelled like a dead body had been in it. She said she did not know where Kaylee was. This call was made on July 15, 2008, at approximately 7:43 p.m. After the call, Cindy spoke with Casey again. Casey now said that she had last seen Kaylee on June 9th, not June 16th. She said the nanny had kidnapped Kaylee on that date. She gave a different apartment number and a different description of the nanny. She also said she had been looking for Kaylee ever since, but had not told anyone because she was afraid. Later that same night, Cindy called 911 a second time. She told the dispatcher that her daughter was now admitting that she had not seen Kaylee for 31 days. She said there was something wrong with the car and that Casey would not tell her where Kaylee was. The dispatcher asked to speak with Casey. Casey took the phone and told the dispatcher that her daughter had been taken by a nanny on June 9th. She gave the nanny's name as Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. She said she had been trying to find her daughter herself because she did not trust the police. At that point, law enforcement officers were dispatched to the Anthony home. The investigation was about to begin. But the events of that investigation, the discovery of Kaylee's body, and the legal proceedings that followed belonged to the next part of the story. When law enforcement officers arrived at the Anthony home on the night of July 15, 2008, they spoke with Casey Anthony. She repeated her story that her daughter Kaylee had been kidnapped on June 9th by a nanny named Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez. She said she had been trying to find Kaylee on her own. The officers wrote down her statements but did not arrest her that night. The next morning, July 16th, investigators took Casey to the Orange County Sheriff's Office for further questioning. During that interview, Casey told detectives she worked at Universal Studios. She said she had left Kaylee with the nanny while she went to work. When detectives drove her to Universal Studios and asked her to show them her office, Casey walked inside the building and then admitted she no longer worked there. In truth, she had not worked at Universal Studios since she took maternity leave nearly 3 years earlier. After that admission, Casey was arrested on charges of providing false information to law enforcement. Following her arrest, investigators began searching for Kaylee. They checked the apartment address Casey had given. It had been vacant for more than 140 days. They interviewed friends, family, and acquaintances. They learned that Casey had not reported Kaylee missing, had not looked for her, and had instead spent the month of June and July with her boyfriend and friends. The car that had been impounded was seized for forensic testing. Investigators noticed a strong odor inside the trunk and collected samples for analysis. On July 22nd, 2008, a judge set bail at $500,000. Casey was released after a bail bondsman posted the bond, but she was later returned to jail when the bondsman revoked the bond after angry crowds gathered near the Anthony home. On September 5th, she was released again after her parents posted bond, and she was fitted with an electronic monitoring device. On October 14th, 2008, a grand jury indicted Casey on charges of first-degree murder, aggravated child abuse, aggravated manslaughter of a child, and 4 counts of providing false information to law enforcement. She was arrested again and held without bond. She pleaded not guilty on October 28th. Meanwhile, the search for Kaylee continued. On December 11th, 2008, a meter reader named Roy Kronk called police after spotting something suspicious in a wooded area near the Anthony home. Officers responded and found a trash bag containing the skeletal remains of a young child. The remains were wrapped in a blanket inside a laundry bag. Duct tape was found near the front of the skull. Over the next several days, additional bones were recovered from the area. On December 19th, the medical examiner confirmed the remains were Kaylee's. The cause of death was listed as homicide by undetermined means. With the discovery of Kaylee's body, the case became a homicide investigation. Prosecutors gathered forensic evidence from Casey's car, the family computer, and the remains. In April 2009, the state of Florida announced it would seek the death penalty against Casey. Jury selection began on May 9, 2011, in Pinellas County, Florida, because the case had received extensive media attention in Orlando. 12 jurors and 5 alternates were sworn in. The jurors were sequestered for the duration of the trial to keep them from outside information. The trial began on May 24, 2011, with Judge Belvin Perry presiding. The prosecution presented its case over several weeks. They called witnesses including George and Cindy Anthony, forensic experts, and law enforcement officers. They introduced evidence about the odor in Casey's car, the presence of chloroform in the trunk, and computer searches for chloroform. The prosecution argued that Casey had killed her daughter to free herself from parenting responsibilities. The defense, led by attorney Jose Baez, argued that Kaylee had accidentally drowned in the family swimming pool on June 16, 2008. The defense claimed that George Anthony had found the body and disposed of it, and that Casey's lies were a result of years of abuse and denial. Casey did not testify in her own defense. During the trial, the prosecution presented testimony from a software expert who said the family computer had been used to search for chloroform 84 times. After the trial, the expert reported that number was a software error and that only one search had actually occurred. The jury, however, had already begun deliberating before that correction was provided. Closing arguments took place on July 3rd and 4th, 2011. The prosecution maintained that the evidence pointed to murder. The defense emphasized the lack of physical evidence directly linking Casey to the death and stressed the burden of proof on the state. The jury began deliberations on July 4th. On July 5th, 2011, they returned their verdict. Casey Anthony was found not guilty of first-degree murder, aggravated manslaughter of a child, and aggravated child abuse. She was found guilty of 4 misdemeanor counts of providing false information to law enforcement. The jury had accepted the defense argument that the prosecution had not proved beyond a reasonable doubt how Kaylee died or that Casey was responsible. On July 7th, Judge Perry sentenced Casey to 1 year in jail for each of the 4 false statement counts, with the sentences to run consecutively. Because she had been in custody since October 2008, she had already served more than the full sentence. With credit for time served, she was released from jail on July 17, 2011. After her release, Casey left Florida for an undisclosed location. In 2013, she appealed her false statement convictions. A Florida appellate court overturned 2 of the 4 convictions, ruling that the statements made during a single interview could not be punished as separate offenses. The remaining 2 convictions stood. Civil lawsuits followed. A woman named Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez sued Casey for defamation, claiming Casey had falsely identified her as the nanny who had taken Kaylee. The case was eventually dismissed. The search group Texas EquiSearch also sued Casey for the money it spent looking for Kaylee, and the case was settled out of court. A third defamation lawsuit, brought by Roy Kronk, was dismissed in 2019. Cindy and George Anthony continued to live in their home in Orlando. They attended Kaylee's memorial service in 2009 and spoke publicly about their loss. They later separated, but remained in contact with Casey for a time. The public reaction to the verdict was intense. Many people expressed anger and disbelief. The case led to proposed legislation in several states, known as Kaylee's Law, that would make it a crime for a parent to delay reporting a missing child. Some of those laws were enacted. In later years, Casey remained out of the public eye for long periods. She gave a few interviews and participated in a documentary series in 2022, but she never faced further criminal charges in connection with Kaylee's death. The question of how Kaylee Marie Anthony died on June 16, 2008, was never resolved in a court of law, and no one was ever held criminally responsible for her death. Story 2. Anders Behring Breivik was born on February 13, 1979 in Oslo, Norway. His father, Jens, was a civil economist who worked as a diplomat for the Norwegian embassy in London and later in Paris. His mother, Wonche, was a nursing assistant. Anders had a half-sister on his mother's side named Elizabeth, and 3 half-siblings on his father's side, Eric, Jan, and Nina. When Anders was 1 year old, his parents divorced. He had been living in London with them until that point, but after the divorce he moved back to Oslo with his mother. For a time they lived in the Frogner district of Oslo, in an apartment that belonged to his father. When Anders was 4 years old, 2 reports were filed that raised concerns about his mental health. A psychologist who saw him noted that the boy had a peculiar smile. The psychologist wrote that the smile did not seem to come from real emotion, but looked like a deliberate response to his surroundings. Another report came from Norway's National Center for Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. That report raised concerns about how Anders's mother treated him. According to the report, she sexualized the young boy, hit him, and often told him she wished he were dead. The psychiatrist described her as a woman with a very difficult upbringing, a borderline personality disorder, and a deep depression. They said she projected her own aggressive and sexual fantasies onto her son. The psychiatrists recommended that Anders be taken from his mother and placed into foster care. They believed he could not develop normally if he stayed with her. But the Child Welfare Service did not follow this recommendation. The background of Anders's mother helps explain why the situation became so troubled. She had left her own abusive home when she was 17 and became a teenage mother soon after. In her 30s, she became pregnant with Anders and married his father. Even before Anders was born, she said she wanted an abortion, but by the time she went to the hospital, she was past the 3-month limit. Later, psychologists reported that she thought Anders was a nasty child and that she believed he was kicking her on purpose while she was pregnant. She stopped breastfeeding him early because she said he was sucking the life out of her. After the divorce, Anders's mother borrowed his father's apartment in Frogner. Neighbors later said they heard fights coming from the apartment and that the mother left her children alone for long periods while she worked as a nurse. In 1981, she applied for financial welfare benefits. In 1982, she asked for respite care for Anders, saying she was overwhelmed and unable to care for him. She described him as clingy and demanding. With the help of the Child Welfare Service, Anders was placed with a young couple for respite care. That couple later told the police about an incident when Anders's mother brought 2-year-old Anders to their house. The mother reportedly asked that the boy be allowed to touch the man's penis because, she said, Anders had no man to compare himself to and had only ever seen girls' parts. The couple gave this statement to the police years later, but the date of the incident was not recorded. In February 1983, Anders and his mother began attending the National Center for Child and Adolescent Psychiatry as outpatients. They stayed there during the daytime for about 1 month. The psychiatrists observed Anders closely. They saw that he showed little emotional engagement. He did not show joy, and he did not cry when he was hurt. He did not try to play with other children. He was extremely clean and became anxious when his toys were not in perfect order. The psychiatrists believed that his mother had punished him severely for showing emotions, and because of that he had learned to show no visible feelings at all. They also thought he had developed obsessive-compulsive behaviors out of fear of being punished by his mother. The staff observed that Anders's mother sometimes told him she wished he was dead, even when she knew health personnel were watching. At other times she was overly affectionate. Some nights she made Anders share her bed with close body contact. The psychiatrists concluded that this was an unacceptable situation for a 4-year-old. The final report from 1983 stated that Anders was a victim of his mother's projections of paranoid aggressive and sexual fears toward men. It said she projected onto him her own primitive, aggressive, and sexual fantasies, all the qualities in men that she regards as dangerous and aggressive. The report also noted that Anders reacted to his mother by switching between clinginess, petty aggression, and extreme childishness. The psychiatrists strongly recommended that Anders be removed from his mother and placed in foster care. They said urgent action was needed to prevent severely skewed development in the boy. When Anders's father learned about the situation, he filed for custody. But after he did that, Anders's mother changed her position. She had previously agreed to respite care, but now she demanded that Anders be returned to her full custody. Both parents hired lawyers. The case eventually ended because the Child Welfare Service believed they did not have enough evidence to win in court. One of the main reasons was that staff from the nursery school Anders attended gave a different picture. They described Anders as a happy child and said they saw nothing wrong with him or his home life. The psychiatrists at the National Center for Child and Adolescent Psychiatry disagreed with the nursery staff and continued to insist that Anders needed to be removed from his mother. In 1984, a hearing was held before the Municipal Child Welfare Committee. The Child Welfare Service was represented by a social worker who had no prior experience handling such cases. The agency lost the case. The committee ruled only that the family should receive supervision. After only 3 visits, even that supervision stopped. Anders was never again placed in respite care or foster care. Anders grew up living with his mother and his half-sister in the West End of Oslo. He regularly visited his father and stepmother in France until his parents divorced when he was 12. His mother later remarried an officer in the Norwegian army. For school, Anders attended Smestad Grammar School, then Rist Junior High, then Hartbig Nissen School, and later Oslo Commerce School. A former classmate remembered him as an intelligent student who was physically stronger than other children his age. The same classmate said Anders sometimes took care of people who were being bullied. When Anders was 15, he chose to be confirmed in the Lutheran Church of Norway. In his early teens, his behavior began to change. He became rebellious. He was part of the hip-hop community in West Oslo and spent a lot of time on graffiti. He took graffiti more seriously than his friends did. He was caught by the police several times and was fined twice. The Child Welfare Service was notified again about him. When he was 15, his father stopped having contact with him. According to Anders's mother, it was his father who ended the contact after Anders was caught for spraying graffiti. But Anders's father later said that Anders was the one who ended the contact, and that he had always been willing to see his son despite the boy's destructive activities. Around the same time, Anders fell out with his best friend and left the hip-hop community. As a teenager, Anders began spending his spare time weight training. He started using anabolic steroids. He paid close attention to his appearance and his physical strength. When he reached the age for military service, Anders was called for a mandatory conscript assessment. The Norwegian Defense Security Department found him unfit for service. He was exempted from conscription and received no military training. After he turned 21, Anders worked in the customer service department of a company. A former co-worker described him as an exceptional colleague. A close friend from that time said Anders usually had a big ego. Anders told people he enjoyed working with people from many different countries and said he was kind to everyone. In his early 20s, he had cosmetic surgery on his chin, nose, and forehead. He was pleased with the results. During the years before he turned 30, Anders traveled extensively. He visited as many as 24 different countries. In 2005, he went to Belarus. Norwegian prosecutors later said he went there to meet a woman he had met on a dating website, and that the same woman later visited him in Oslo. He also joined a gun club in 2005. At the same time, he became involved in politics. At the age of 20, he had joined the Progress Party, an anti-immigration party in Norway. In 2002, he became the chairman of the local Vest Oslo branch of the party's youth organization. He held that position from January to October of that year, and then remained on the board of the branch until November 2004. He paid his membership dues for the last time in 2004, and he was officially removed from the party's membership list in 2006. In the years that followed, Anders started a computer programming business. He claimed that by the age of 24, he had made his first million kroner. But the company later went bankrupt, and he was reported for several breaches of the law. Around that time, he moved back into his mother's home to save money. His mental state, according to psychiatrists who later evaluated him, began to deteriorate. He became withdrawn and isolated. By 2009, his declared assets were 390,000 kroner, according to Norwegian tax records. He had no declared income that year. In May 2009, he founded a farming company called Breivik Geofarm. He described it as a business to grow melons and vegetables. He used the farm to buy large amounts of fertilizer and other chemicals. His neighbors later said he was a city dweller who wore expensive shirts and knew nothing about rural life. He covered the windows of the farmhouse. He visited Prague in 2010 to try to buy illegal weapons, but he was not successful. So he decided to use legal channels in Norway instead. By showing his membership in a pistol club, he obtained a license for a semi-automatic Glock 34 pistol. By obtaining a hunting license, he also obtained a semi-automatic Ruger Mini 14 rifle. He continued to travel. Norwegian police later sent legal requests to 16 countries to investigate his activities before the attacks. He had credit cards that gave him access to thousands of euros in credit, and he used them to pay for his preparations. His mother remained in his life, though the early reports of her behavior had never been resolved by any official action. He continued to live for a time in her home, and he saved money there while planning something that had not yet taken shape in the view of the outside world. After moving into his mother's home to save money, Anders Behring Breivik began putting a plan into action that he said he had been developing for nearly 9 years. He used his farming company, Breivik Geofarm, as a cover. The company allowed him to buy large amounts of artificial fertilizer without raising suspicion. In May 2011, a farming supplier sold his company 6 tons of fertilizer. He used some of this fertilizer to manufacture explosives. He also bought small amounts of other chemicals from online shops. One purchase from a Polish online store placed his name on a list that the Norwegian Customs Service passed to the Police Security Service, but the information did not appear suspicious at the time. He prepared a document that he titled 2083, a European Declaration of Independence. It ran to 1,518 pages. He signed it with the name Andrew Barrick, an English version of his own name. In this document he described his beliefs, his plans, and his reasons for what he intended to do. He claimed the attacks were necessary to save Norway and Western Europe from what he called a Muslim takeover. He also blamed feminism and multiculturalism for what he saw as the destruction of European culture. About 90 minutes before he carried out the first attack, he emailed this document to more than 1,000 addresses. To finance his preparations, he used 9 credit cards. By June 2011, he paid off the outstanding amounts on those cards, so he would have full access to funds during the final stage of his planning. He estimated the total cost of the attacks at about 317,000 euros, including money he spent on materials and the income he lost by not working. In late June or early July 2011, he moved to the farm he had rented in a rural area north of Asta in Amat municipality, about 140 kilometers northeast of Oslo. There he manufactured an explosive device using the fertilizer he had bought. He placed the finished bomb inside a van. On the morning of July 22, 2011, he drove the van to Oslo. He parked it in the Regjeringskvartalet, the government quarter of Norway. He placed the van next to the tower block that housed the office of the Prime Minister, Jens Stoltenberg. At 15:25 and 22 seconds in the afternoon, the bomb exploded. The blast killed 8 people. More than 200 people were injured, 12 of them severely. The explosion damaged government buildings and sent shockwaves through the center of Oslo. After setting the van, Breivik left the city. He drove to the area around Tyrifjorden, a lake about 40 kilometers northwest of Oslo. On the island of Utøya, the youth wing of the Norwegian Labour Party was holding its annual summer camp. More than 600 young people were on the island. Breivik had prepared for this part of his plan. He wore a homemade police uniform and carried a fake police identification card. He also carried the semi-automatic Ruger Mini 140 rifle and the Glock 34 pistol he had legally obtained. He drove to the ferry dock that served the island. He showed his fake identification and told the ferry operator he was a police officer sent to conduct a routine security check on the island. The operator took him across. He arrived on the island at approximately 17:17. He got off the ferry and walked toward the main building where many of the camp participants were gathered. He began shooting. Over the next hour and 13 minutes, he moved methodically across the island. He shot at people in the buildings, along the shoreline, and in the water as they tried to swim away. Some hid in bushes, behind rocks, or inside closets. He searched for them. He called out to them and shot them when they responded. He fired at young people who were swimming toward the mainland. During the shooting, he used both the rifle and the pistol. He reloaded multiple times. He did not stop until the police arrived. The police tactical unit, called Delta, was based in Oslo. They received word of the shooting and traveled to the area. They arrived at the ferry dock on the mainland and had to find a boat to take them to the island. They reached the island at approximately 18:25. When they confronted Breivik, he put down his weapons and surrendered without resistance. He did not fight and did not try to escape. By the time he surrendered, he had killed 69 people on the island, most of them teenagers and young adults. 33 others were injured. Among the dead were friends of the Prime Minister and the stepbrother of Norway's Crown Princess Mette-Marit. After his arrest, police held him on the island and questioned him through the night. He admitted to both attacks. He told the officers that the purpose was to save Norway and Western Europe from what he described as a Muslim takeover. He said the Labour Party had to pay the price for what he claimed was its failure to protect Norway. He was then moved to a holding cell in Oslo. When asked about his actions, he referred to himself as the greatest monster since Quisling, referring to the Norwegian Nazi collaborator from World War II. After Anders Behring Breivik surrendered on Utøya, police took him into custody. They held him on the island through the night and questioned him. The next day, he was transferred to a holding cell in Oslo. On July 25, 2011, 3 days after the attacks, he was formally charged with violating Norway's criminal code. The charges were for acts of terrorism, destabilizing basic functions of society, and creating serious fear in the population. The court ordered him held for 8 weeks, with the first 4 weeks in solitary confinement. His custody was extended several times as the investigation continued. The police investigation was massive. Investigators collected evidence from the bomb site in Oslo and from Utøya. They recovered the weapons Breivik used, the materials from his farm, and the digital files he had prepared. They also examined his manifesto, the emails he had sent, and his online activities. International police agencies assisted, and Norway sent legal requests to 16 countries to trace Breivik's travels and purchases. No evidence was ever found that he had any accomplices or that the secret organization he claimed to belong to actually existed. Before the trial could proceed, the court needed to determine whether Breivik was mentally fit to stand trial. In 2011, the first team of court-appointed forensic psychiatrists examined him. They concluded he had paranoid schizophrenia. They said he was psychotic at the time of the attacks and remained psychotic during the observation. Under Norwegian law, that would mean he could not be sentenced to prison, but would instead be committed to a psychiatric hospital. That conclusion was publicly debated and criticized by other mental health experts. The prison's own senior psychiatrist, who had been treating Breivik, reported that she did not see signs of psychosis. Instead, she believed he had personality disorders. Families of the victims, and later the public, pressed for a second evaluation. In January 2012, the Oslo District Court ordered a new panel of psychiatrists to examine Breivik. Breivik initially refused to cooperate with the second team, but later changed his mind. In April 2012, the second evaluation was published. This team concluded that Breivik was not psychotic during the attacks or during the evaluation. Instead, they diagnosed him with antisocial personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. They found him legally sane and therefore criminally responsible for his actions. The criminal trial began on April 16, 2012 in the Oslo District Court. A special courtroom had been built to accommodate the large number of survivors, family members, journalists, and security personnel. Breivik was represented by a defense lawyer named Geir Lipstad. The prosecutors were Inge Bajur Eng and Sven Holden. Breivik admitted to carrying out both attacks but pleaded not guilty, arguing that his actions were necessary to defend Norway. The central question for the court was whether he was sane at the time. During the trial, the prosecution presented evidence of the bomb and the shooting. Survivors and bereaved families gave testimony. Breivik testified for several days, explaining his ideology and describing his planning. Expert witnesses, including psychiatrists, gave conflicting opinions about his mental state. The defense argued that his extreme beliefs and behavior showed he was psychotic. The prosecution argued that he was fully aware of what he was doing and had planned it with careful control. The trial lasted through May and June. Closing arguments were delivered on June 22nd. On August 24, 2012, the court delivered its verdict. The 5 judges ruled unanimously that Breivik was sane at the time of the attacks. They found him guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to preventive detention, which is the maximum penalty under Norwegian law. The sentence was 21 years in prison, with a minimum term of 10 years before he could be considered for parole. Preventive detention means that at the end of the 21-year period, The court can extend his imprisonment for 5 years at a time, for as long as he is considered a danger to society. This makes the sentence potentially indefinite. Breivik announced that he did not recognize the court's authority and considered the verdict illegitimate. However, he chose not to appeal. He said that appealing would mean accepting the court's right to judge him. Because he did not appeal, the verdict became final in September 2012. After the trial, Breivik was moved from the detention center in Isla to Cheyenne Prison, a high-security facility. He was held in a section for prisoners requiring particularly high security. He was isolated from other inmates. Prison staff limited his contact with the outside world. His letters were censored, and visitors were restricted. His mother visited him 5 times before she died in 2013. He was not permitted to attend her funeral. In the years that followed, Breivik sued the Norwegian government twice over his prison conditions. In 2016, a civil trial was held in Oslo District Court. Breivik argued that his isolation, the frequent strip searches, and the restrictions on his communications violated the European Convention on Human Rights. He gave a Nazi salute at the start of the trial. The district court ruled partly in his favor, finding that his isolation amounted to inhuman treatment. But the government appealed, and in 2017 a higher court overturned that decision. The appeals court ruled that his conditions did not violate his rights. Norway's Supreme Court declined to hear the case, so the decision stood. Breivik continued to be held in isolation. He enrolled in a political science program at the University of Oslo and passed 2 courses in 2015, but later dropped out. In 2022, he was transferred to Ringerike Prison, still in a high-security section. Prison officials allowed him occasional contact with other inmates, but such interactions were brief and closely supervised. As his minimum 10-year term approached, Breivik became eligible to apply for parole. In 2021, his first parole request was denied. The court found that he still posed a danger to society. He applied again, and in 2022 a trial was held to consider his petition. At the start of that hearing, he again gave Nazi salutes. He testified that he remained a Nazi, but claimed he no longer intended to use violence. The court denied parole, stating that he appeared obviously mentally disturbed, and that his mindset remained impenetrable to others. In 2024, Breivik filed another lawsuit against the government over his prison isolation. The trial was held inside the prison in January of that year. He told the court he was using antidepressants and had thoughts of suicide. He also said he regretted his actions. The government argued that his isolation was necessary for security. In February 2024, the court ruled that his human rights were not being violated and that his isolation could continue. Breivik appealed, and in December 2024 a court of appeals heard the case. In May 2025, the verdict became final when Norway's Supreme Court declined to hear a further appeal. Later in 2024, another parole hearing was held. In November, the court again rejected his request, ruling that his continued incarceration was necessary for public safety. Throughout his imprisonment, Breivik received legal aid from lawyers paid by the government, as is standard in Norwegian criminal cases. His legal representation changed over time. From 2014 onward, he was represented by a lawyer named Øystein Storvik. In prison, Breivik became a supporter of Donald Trump and of Russia under Vladimir Putin. He also changed his name twice, in 2017 to Fjotolf Hansen, and in 2025 to a fantasy name loosely based on Old Norse. The survivors of the attacks and the families of those who died continued to live with the consequences of that day. Many participated in the trial and the subsequent legal proceedings. Some formed organizations to support each other and to promote dialogue against extremism. The government of Norway established a memorial at Utøya and rebuilt the government quarter in Oslo. Anders Behring Breivik remains in prison under preventive detention, with no set release date, and his future will be determined by periodic reviews that assess whether he continues to pose a danger to society. Story 3. Joran Andreas Petrus van der Sloot was born on August 6, 1987, in the city of Arnhem in the Netherlands. He was the second of 3 sons. His father, Paulus van der Sloot, was a lawyer. His mother, Anita van der Sloot-Hugen, worked as an art teacher. In 1990, when Joran was 3 years old, the family moved from the Netherlands to the island of Aruba. Aruba is a Dutch territory in the Caribbean Sea. The family settled there because of his father's work. Joran grew up on the island. He attended the International School of Aruba. He was a good student and earned honors for his schoolwork. He also played soccer and tennis. He competed in tennis doubles with his father in a local tournament in 2005. His mother later said that Joran was a habitual liar. She also said he had a habit of sneaking out of the house at night to go to casinos. These behaviors started when he was a teenager. In May 2005, when Joran was 17 years old, a young American woman named Natalie Holloway went missing on Aruba. Joran was one of the last people seen with her. On June 9, 2005, he was arrested along with 2 brothers named Deepak and Satish Kalpo. They were held for questioning. The Kalpo brothers were released in early July. Joran remained in custody for a longer period. On September 3, 2005, all 3 were released because the prosecutor said there was not enough evidence to charge them. After his release, Joran was required to stay within Dutch territory while the investigation continued. On September 5, 2005, he left Aruba and went to the Netherlands to study international business management at HN University of Applied Sciences. A few days later, a court removed his travel restrictions, so he was free to move. In the months that followed, Joran gave interviews to American television shows. He said that he and the Kalpo brothers had initially lied to the police, but later told the truth. He said he left Natalie Holloway alone on a beach at her request. His parents also appeared on television to say their son was being treated unfairly. In February 2006, while Joran and his father were in New York City for an interview, Natalie Holloway's parents filed a lawsuit against him. The case was later dismissed because the court said it did not have authority over the matter. In April 2007, a book was published that Joran had written with a Dutch reporter. In the book, he described his version of events surrounding the Holloway case. He said he wanted to be open and honest about what had happened. Later that year, in November 2007, Joran was arrested again in the Netherlands. The Kalpo brothers were also arrested in Aruba. The prosecutors said there was new incriminating evidence. Joran was sent back to Aruba to face questioning. But on December 7, 2007, he was released without being charged. In early 2008, a Dutch crime reporter named Peter R. de Vries began investigating Joran. In February 2008, an undercover video aired on Dutch television. In the video, Joran was recorded talking to a man he thought was a friend. On the recording, Joran said he had been present when Natalie Holloway died. Later, Joran claimed he had been lying to impress the man, whom he believed was a drug dealer. The prosecutor in Aruba said the video was admissible as evidence, but they still did not have enough to make an arrest. Later in 2008, Joran moved to Thailand. He enrolled at a university in Bangkok, but dropped out. He bought a small restaurant near the campus that sold sandwiches and pizza. He used the false name Murphy Jenkins while living in Thailand to avoid attention. In November 2008, the same Dutch reporter aired more undercover footage. That footage showed Joran talking about sending Thai women to Europe. Authorities later said Thailand was looking into his activities. In August 2009, Joran was seen in Macau playing in a poker tournament. He had begun playing online poker and called himself a professional poker player. He won money in online tournaments. By early 2010, he had sold his restaurant in Thailand and returned to Aruba. On February 10, 2010, Joran's father, Paulus, died of a heart attack while playing tennis. Paulus was 57 years old. Joran returned to Aruba after his father's death. His mother later said that Joran had severe mental problems and that he blamed himself for his father's death. She said he left a note before returning to Aruba that said, "I'm gone, do not worry." Back in Aruba, Joran began spending time gambling. He was looking for ways to make money. His father's legal fees over the years had depleted the family's finances. Joran needed money, and he was willing to do things that would later lead him into new trouble. In late March 2010, about 6 weeks after his father's death, Joran van der Sloot reached out to a lawyer named John Q. Kelly. Kelly was the legal representative for Beth Holloway, the mother of Natalee Holloway. Joran told Kelly that he would reveal where Natalee's body was buried and explain what had happened to her. In exchange, he wanted money. He asked for an advance of $25,000 against a total payment of $250,000. Kelly did not agree to the payment right away. Instead, he notified the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. The FBI set up a sting operation in Aruba with local authorities. In April, Kelly traveled to Aruba and met with Joran. He gave Joran $100 in cash as a show of good faith. The FBI recorded these interactions. On May 10, 2010, Joran received a wire transfer of $15,000 to his bank account in the Netherlands. He also received $10,000 in cash during a meeting in Aruba that was videotaped by undercover investigators. In exchange for this money, Joran told Kelly that his father had buried Natalee's remains in the foundation of a house. He gave specific details about the location. However, authorities later determined that the house did not exist at the time Natalee disappeared. The information was false. After receiving the money, Joran sent an email to Kelly admitting that he had lied about the house. 4 days after receiving the wire transfer, on May 14, 2010, Joran left Aruba and flew to Colombia. From there he traveled to Peru. He had entered Peru to take part in the Latin American Poker Tour, which was scheduled to begin in early June. He arrived in Lima, the capital of Peru, and stayed in a hotel in the Miraflores district called the Hotel TAC. He registered under his own name. For the next 2 weeks, Joran spent time in casinos in Lima. He played poker and other games. On May 29, 2010, he was at a casino called Atlantic City in Lima. He was playing poker at a table. Around 3 o'clock in the morning on May 30th, a young woman named Stephanie Tatiana Flores Ramirez entered the casino alone. She was 21 years old. She was a business student at the University of Lima and was close to graduating. Her father was a well-known businessman in Peru. Stephanie walked to the poker table where Joran was sitting. She had been at the same casino a few days earlier and had won money playing cards. That night, she had won $237 playing poker earlier in the evening. She had also won a larger amount of money days before, about $10,000, which she kept in her car. She came to the casino alone around 3 a.m. and found Joran at the poker table. Joran and Stephanie began talking. Casino surveillance cameras recorded them together. At about 5 a.m., the two left the casino and walked to the Hotel TAC, which was nearby. Hotel security cameras showed them entering the building together and going to room 309, the room Joran had rented. Around 8:10 a.m., Joran was seen on the hotel's security cameras leaving the hotel alone. He walked across the street to a supermarket and bought bread and 2 cups of coffee. He returned to the hotel with the items. About 35 minutes later, at 8:45 a.m., Joran was seen leaving the hotel again. This time he was carrying his bags. He did not return the room key. He left the hotel and traveled south out of Peru. Inside room 309, Stephanie Flores Ramirez was dead. Her body was on the floor. She had suffered severe injuries to her head and face. A tennis racket was found in the room, and investigators later considered it a possible weapon. She had also been strangled. An autopsy later showed that she died from blunt force trauma to the head, which caused a brain hemorrhage, a fractured skull, and a broken neck. She had not been sexually assaulted. After Joran left the hotel, Stephanie's family reported her missing. Her brother's wife searched online for Joran van der Sloot's name after learning he had been seen with Stephanie. She discovered that he was connected to the Natalie Holloway case. This happened about an hour before Stephanie's body was found. On June 2, 2010, a hotel employee entered room 309 and found Stephanie's body. The employee contacted the police. When officers arrived, they saw that the room had been left with the television still on. Joran had already fled the country. Police reviewed the hotel's security footage and saw Joran and Stephanie entering the room together. They also obtained surveillance video from the Atlantic City casino showing the two together before they left. Investigators identified Joran as the lone suspect. They learned that he had left Peru on May 30th and had crossed into Chile. Joran traveled through Chile by taxi. On May 31st, he had crossed the border at a northern crossing point. He continued moving south. At the time, he was carrying a laptop computer, foreign currency, charts showing ocean currents near Lima, and clothing that later tested positive for blood matching Stephanie's type. His mobile phone SIM card was missing, which made it harder to track his location. While he was traveling through Chile, he sent a text message to an ex-girlfriend in Aruba asking her to send him money so he could buy a plane ticket back to Aruba. He was trying to leave South America, but before he could get to an airport, he was spotted by police in Chile. They began watching his movements. On June 3, 2010, Chilean police located Joran van der Sloot traveling in a taxi on a highway between the coastal city of Vina del Mar and the capital city of Santiago. He was near a town called Curacaví. The police stopped the taxi and arrested him. When they searched him and his belongings, they found a laptop computer, foreign currency, a business card case, charts showing ocean currents near Lima, and clothing that had blood stains on it. That same day in the United States, a federal court in the Northern District of Alabama filed charges against Joran. He was charged with extortion and wire fraud related to the money he had taken from Beth Holloway's legal representative in April and May. The United States issued an arrest warrant through Interpol, requesting that he be held for prosecution in America. Joran told the Chilean police a story about what happened in Lima. He said that armed robbers had been hiding in the hotel room and that they killed Stephanie Flores when she made noise. After questioning, Chilean authorities decided to send him to Peru to face the homicide charge there. On June 4th, Chilean police transported him to the border crossing at Chacaluta and handed him over to Peruvian authorities. On June 5th, Joran arrived at police headquarters in Lima. He was interrogated about the death of Stephanie Flores. He had a lawyer with him, and the Dutch embassy provided a translator. For the first few days, he maintained that he was innocent. On June 7, 2010, after hours of interrogation, Joran signed a written confession. In the confession, he said that he had left the hotel room briefly to buy coffee and bread. When he returned, he said he found Stephanie using his laptop computer without his permission. He said an argument started. He said she tried to leave the room, and he grabbed her by the neck and hit her. He said he did not mean to kill her. The police report stated that he had considered putting her body in a suitcase, but decided against it because hotel staff would have stopped him at the front desk. After he signed the confession, Joran told a detective that he knew the place where Natalie Holloway's body was buried. The detective said they did not question him about that case because they were focused on the Flores case. On June 8th, Joran was formally presented to the media as the confessed killer of Stephanie Flores. Later that day, he began to change his story. He told a Dutch newspaper that he had been tricked by the police. He said he did not understand the confession because it was written in Spanish. He claimed he signed it in panic. He said he was framed by another gambler who was working for the FBI. He formally tried to retract his confession. On June 11, 2010, a judge in Lima ordered Joran held on charges of first-degree murder and robbery. The judge determined that he had acted with ferocity and great cruelty. Joran was transferred to Miguel Castro prison, a maximum security facility. He was placed in a cell separated from the general population for his own safety. On June 25, 2010, a Peruvian judge ruled that Joran's confession was valid. The judge noted that Joran had been represented by a lawyer and had a translator before he signed the confession. The motion to throw out the confession was rejected. In the months that followed, Joran's defense lawyer filed multiple motions to delay the case. The lawyer argued that his client's rights had been violated. Peruvian authorities continued their investigation. They analyzed Joran's laptop computer and determined that Stephanie Flores could not have accessed any information about Natalie Holloway during the time she was in the hotel room. They also noted that Joran's toxicology report showed no signs of drugs in his system at the time of the killing, contradicting his earlier claim that he was high on marijuana. On January 11, 2012, Joran van der Sloot pleaded guilty to the murder of Stephanie Flores and to robbery. 2 days later, on January 13, 2012, the court sentenced him to 28 years in prison. He was also ordered to pay $75,000 in restitution to the Flores family. Hours after the sentence was read, he was transferred to a different maximum security prison called Piedras Gordas, located north of Lima. While serving his sentence in Peru, Joran was later transferred to another prison called Calapauca. In August 2020, while incarcerated, he became involved in drug trafficking. He set up a cocaine distribution operation inside the prison. A family member of another inmate smuggled cocaine into the prison by hiding it in sugar beets. Joran sold the cocaine to other inmates and also arranged for packages to be sent to destinations outside the prison. Prison officials discovered the operation. In February 2021, Joran was convicted of drug trafficking. Because of this conviction, a Peruvian court added 18 years to his sentence. Under Peruvian law, a prison sentence cannot exceed 35 years unless the prisoner is serving a life sentence. With the additional time, Joran's release date was set for 2045. For many years, the United States had been seeking to extradite Joran to face the extortion and wire fraud charges related to the Holloway case. On June 8, 2023, Joran was extradited from Peru to the United States. He arrived in Birmingham, Alabama, and was taken into U.S. custody. The next day, he appeared in federal court in Birmingham and pleaded not guilty to 1 count of extortion and 1 count of wire fraud. On October 18, 2023, Joran changed his plea to guilty. As part of a plea deal, he signed a proffer letter in which he admitted to killing Natalie Holloway. He stated that on the night of May 30, 2005, he beat her to death on an Aruba beach using a cinder block. He said he then disposed of her body in the ocean. The judge sentenced him to 20 years in federal prison for the extortion charges. This sentence was ordered to run at the same time as his existing sentence in Peru, meaning he would not serve additional time beyond what he was already serving. On the day he pleaded guilty, Joran's statement about Natalie Holloway's death was made public. The case that had begun 18 years earlier finally had a confession and a resolution in court. Joran van der Sloot remains in custody. He is scheduled to serve his combined sentences in Peru until at least 2045. The Flores family received their restitution payment. Beth Holloway, Natalie's mother, attended the court proceedings in Alabama, and later stated that she finally had answers about what happened to her daughter. The story of how one young man's choices led to violence, deception, and multiple crimes across 3 countries ended with a confession and a prison sentence that will keep him locked away for decades. Story 4. Oscar Leonard Carl Pistorius was born on November 22, 1986 in Sandton, Johannesburg, South Africa. His parents were Henke and Sheila Pistorius. He had an older brother and a younger sister. The family was Christian and spoke Afrikaans at home. Oscar also learned English and became fluent in both languages. When Oscar was born, both of his lower legs were not fully formed. He had a condition where the fibula bones were missing and his feet were also partly missing. When he was 11 months old, doctors amputated both his legs halfway between the knee and the ankle. He grew up using prosthetic legs. Oscar's mother, Sheila, was a strong influence on him. She taught him to believe he could do anything. She treated him the same as his siblings. She did not want him to feel disabled. She died when Oscar was 15 years old. She was 43. Her death affected him deeply. He later had the dates of her birth and death tattooed on his arm to remember her. As a child, Oscar went to Constantia Kloof Primary School. Later he attended Pretoria Boys High School. He was active in many sports. He played rugby for the school's 3rd team. He also played water polo and tennis at the provincial level between the ages of 11 and 13. In addition, he trained in wrestling at a local gym. The owner of the gym later said it took him 6 months to notice Oscar had no legs because Oscar was able to do all the exercises: boxing, skipping, press UPS, and more. In June 2003, Oscar injured his knee while playing rugby. The injury was serious. He went to the University of Pretoria's High Performance Center to rehabilitate. There, in January 2004, he was introduced to running. His first coach was Ampie Lou. He started running with carbon fiber blades that were fitted by a local prosthetist. Later he was fitted by an American prosthetist with blades from an Icelandic company. He enjoyed running from the start. Oscar began studying at the University of Pretoria in 2006. He worked toward a bachelor's degree in business management with sports science. Because of his training and competitions, he took fewer courses each year. He joked that he would probably finish his degree when he turned 30. His athletic career grew quickly. In 2004, he competed in the Paralympic Games in Athens. He won a bronze medal in the 100 meters and a gold medal in the 200 meters, setting a world record. In 2005, he ran in the South African Championships against non-disabled runners and finished 6th in the 400 meters. That same year he won gold at the Paralympic World Cup. He kept breaking records in the 100, 200, and 400 meters for athletes with amputations. His success brought attention. Some people in athletics started asking whether his prosthetic blades gave him an unfair advantage over runners with natural legs. In 2007, the International Athletics Federation changed its rules to ban devices that might provide an advantage. They began testing Oscar to see if his blades helped him more than a natural leg would. In early 2008, the Athletics Federation ruled that Oscar could not compete in their events. He appealed the decision. The Court of Arbitration for Sport heard his case in April 2008. In May 2008, the court ruled in his favor. They said there was not enough evidence that his blades gave him a net advantage. He was allowed to try to qualify for the 2008 Olympic Games. He tried to qualify for the 400 meters at the Olympics. He ran several races in mid-2008. His best time was close to the qualifying standard, but not fast enough. The South African Olympic Committee did not select him for the 400 meters or for the relay team. Instead, he went to the 2008 Paralympic Games in Beijing. There he won gold medals in the 100 meters, 200 meters, and 400 meters, setting Paralympic records. After the 2008 Games, Oscar continued to train and compete. In 2011, he achieved the qualifying time for the World Championships in the 400 meters. He ran in the World Championships and won a silver medal as part of the 4x400 meters relay team. He became the first amputee to win a medal at a non-disabled World Track Championship. In 2012, he qualified for the London Olympic Games. He was the first double-leg amputee to run in the Olympics. He competed in the 400 meters and the 4x400 meters relay. Later that year, he also competed in the London Paralympics, where he won gold in the 400 meters and silver in the 200 meters. Outside of sports, Oscar had sponsorships with companies like Nike, Oakley, and BT. He was seen as a symbol of overcoming obstacles. He was given awards and honors. He also appeared on television shows and gave interviews. He lived in a house in a gated estate in Pretoria called Silverwood's Country Estate. He had interests such as architecture, motorcycling, playing electric guitar, and breeding racehorses. In February 2009, he was in a serious boat accident on the Vaal River. He was thrown from the boat and broke bones in his face. He had surgery and recovered fully, but the accident disrupted his training for some time. Oscar had a close relationship with his mother's memory. He also kept in touch with his father, brother, and sister. He was known to be competitive and driven. His daily life revolved around training, travel, and public appearances. By the end of 2012, he had achieved more than any double amputee athlete before him. In late 2012, Oscar Pistorius was at the height of his fame. He had returned from the London Olympics and Paralympics and was doing interviews and public appearances. He had been in a relationship with a woman named Riva Steenkamp. Riva was a model and a paralegal. She was 30 years old. They had been dating for about 3 months. They spent time together at Oscar's house in the Silverwoods Country Estate in Pretoria. On the evening of February 13th, 2013, Oscar and Riva were at his home. They had dinner together. Riva brought gifts for Oscar. She stayed the night. At around 10 p.m., they went to the bedroom. Oscar said later that he and Riva had a conversation, and then she went to sleep while he stayed awake and looked at his phone. He said he then went to sleep as well. In the early morning of February 14th, 2013, around 3 a.m., Oscar got out of bed. He said he went to the balcony to bring in 2 fans that were running outside. He claimed he heard a sound from the bathroom. He thought it was an intruder hiding in the toilet cubicle inside the bathroom. He said he did not turn on the lights. He said he felt vulnerable because he was not wearing his prosthetic legs. Oscar went to the bathroom. He had a 9mm pistol that he kept under his bed. He took the gun with him. He walked on his stumps down the passage toward the bathroom. He said he shouted warnings to the supposed intruder. He then fired 4 shots through the closed toilet door. One of the shots hit Riva Steenkamp. She had been in the toilet cubicle. She was struck in the head, hip, and arm. The shots were fired from a distance of about 2 to 3 feet from the door. After firing, Oscar went back to the bedroom. He said he then realized Riva was not in the bed. He said he put on his prosthetic legs and tried to kick the toilet door open. When he could not open it, he took a cricket bat and broke down the door. He found Riva inside. She was still alive but badly wounded. He carried her downstairs. He tried to help her. He called a friend and then called an ambulance. Security guards at the estate had heard the shots and came to the house. Oscar told them everything was fine. When they saw Riva, they called the police. Paramedics arrived and tried to revive Riva, but she died at the scene from her wounds. That same morning, police arrived at the house. Oscar was taken into custody. He was questioned. He told the police he had mistaken Riva for an intruder. He was arrested and charged with murder. Before the shooting, There were other incidents involving Oscar and firearms. In September 2012, at a restaurant in Johannesburg, Oscar was with a friend. A friend of Oscar's had a gun under a table. Oscar took the gun and handed it to his friend. The gun went off inside the restaurant. No one was injured. Later, in a separate incident, Oscar was accused of firing a gun through the sunroof of a car while driving with friends. He denied that he was the one who fired. Both of these incidents would later become part of the charges against him. In January 2013, about a month before the shooting, Oscar and Riva had gone to an event together. Friends later said they had arguments at times, but there was no public record of violence between them before the shooting. The shooting happened on Valentine's Day. News spread quickly. The story became international. Oscar's version was that he thought an intruder was in the house and that he fired in fear for his life. The police said they found a cricket bat covered in blood and the toilet door broken. They also found that the toilet door had bullet holes from the inside out. The police took Oscar to a station. He was kept in a holding cell. A few days later, a bail hearing began. The prosecutor argued that Oscar had intentionally killed Riva after an argument. The defense argued it was a mistake. At the bail hearing, the judge allowed Oscar to be released on bail after several days in custody. He was ordered to surrender his passport and not return to his home in Silverwoods. After his release on bail, Oscar stayed at his uncle's house. He continued to see his family and lawyers. He did not compete in any races. The murder case was set to go to trial in the Pretoria High Court. After Oscar Pistorius was arrested on the morning of February 14, 2013, police investigators began collecting evidence at his home. Forensic experts examined the bedroom, the bathroom, and the toilet cubicle. They measured the bullet holes in the door. They took photographs of the cricket bat that was used to break down the door. They also collected shell casings and swabbed for gunshot residue. The pathologist performed an autopsy on Riva Steenkamp. The autopsy showed she was hit by 3 bullets, one in the head, one in the hip, and one in the arm. A 4th bullet did not hit her. The police also looked into Oscar's phone records and Riva's phone records. They found that both had used their phones during the night. They also spoke to neighbors in the gated estate who heard noises. Some neighbors said they heard shouting and gunshots. Others said they heard a woman's voice raised before the shots. This became a key point in the investigation. The investigation took several months. The prosecutor, Jerry Nell, prepared the case for trial. The state's theory was that Oscar and Riva had an argument that night and that Oscar intentionally killed her. The defense, led by lawyer Barry Rue, maintained that Oscar believed an intruder was in the bathroom and fired by mistake. The trial began on March 3, 2014 in the Pretoria High Court. Judge Thokozile Masipa presided. There was no jury. Over the following months, witnesses testified for both sides. Neighbors gave their accounts of hearing sounds. A ballistics expert explained the angle of the shots. A forensic expert testified about the order in which the shots were fired. Oscar's friends and Riva's friends also testified. Oscar took the stand in his own defense. He testified for several days. He described his fear of crime, his vulnerability without his prosthetic legs, and the moment he fired. He also apologized to Riva's family. During cross-examination, the prosecutor pressed him on why he did not check if Riva was still in bed before firing, and why he did not fire a warning shot. Oscar became emotional several times during his testimony. In May 2014, the judge ordered a psychiatric evaluation after a defense expert said Oscar had generalized anxiety disorder. Oscar was sent to a state hospital for 30 days. The evaluation concluded that he did not have a mental illness that prevented him from knowing right from wrong. The trial resumed in June 2014. On September 12, 2014, Judge Masipa delivered her verdict. She found Oscar not guilty of murder. Instead, She found him guilty of culpable homicide, which is the South African equivalent of manslaughter. She ruled that the state did not prove beyond reasonable doubt that he intended to kill Riva. She also found him guilty on one gun charge, discharging a firearm in a restaurant in 2012. He was found not guilty on two other gun charges. On October 21, 2014, the judge sentenced Oscar to 5 years in prison for culpable homicide and a 3-year suspended sentence for the restaurant gun incident. He was taken to Kosi Mampuru II prison in Pretoria. In November 2014, the state appealed the verdict. Prosecutors argued that the judge had made a legal error. They said Oscar should have been convicted of murder because he must have known that firing 4 shots into a small toilet cubicle would kill the person behind the door. In December 2014, Judge Masipa granted the state permission to appeal the verdict, but not the sentence. While the appeal was pending, Oscar remained in prison. In June 2015, the parole board recommended he be released to house arrest after serving 1/6 of his sentence. The release was scheduled for August 2015, but the justice minister blocked it. Oscar was released from prison on October 19, 2015, to go under house arrest at his uncle's home. He was still waiting for the appeal court's decision. On November 3, 2015, the Supreme Court of Appeal heard the state's appeal. On December 8, 2015, the court issued its ruling. By unanimous decision, the 5 judges overturned the culpable homicide conviction. They found Oscar guilty of murder. The court ruled that he must have known that firing into the door would kill whoever was behind it, regardless of who he thought it was. The case was sent back to the trial court for a new sentence. Oscar remained under house arrest while his lawyers tried to appeal the murder conviction to the Constitutional Court. In March 2016, the Constitutional Court refused to hear the appeal. The murder conviction stood. In June 2016, the sentencing hearing for murder began. The state asked for a long prison term. The defense asked for leniency. On July 6, 2016, Judge Masipa sentenced Oscar to 6 years in prison. She said there were substantial and compelling circumstances to reduce the sentence from the usual 15-year minimum. The state appealed again, arguing the 6-year sentence was too lenient. On November 24, 2017, the Supreme Court of Appeal increased the sentence to 13 years and 5 months. The court said the 6-year term did not fit the crime. They calculated the total sentence as 15 years minus the time already served. Oscar tried to appeal to the Constitutional Court again, but in April 2018, the appeal was dismissed. He was now required to serve his full sentence. He was moved to a Tarajevo Correctional Center, a facility better suited for disabled prisoners. In 2023, a parole board considered Oscar for early release. Riva's mother, June Steenkamp, opposed the release, saying Oscar had not shown remorse. The parole board denied him parole in March 2023. In November 2023, a second parole hearing was held. June Steenkamp did not oppose this time. She said she did not have the energy to face him again. The parole board approved his release on conditions. Oscar Pistorius was released on parole on January 5, 2024. He was required to remain under supervision until his sentence expires on December 5, 2029. He returned to live at his uncle's property. Riva Steenkamp's mother, June, founded the Riva Steenkamp Foundation. The foundation worked to raise awareness about violence against women. She continued to speak publicly about her daughter and about the effects of the case. Oscar Pistorius, once celebrated as an athlete who overcame disability, became a convicted murderer. His sporting records and honors were revoked. He no longer competes. His parole conditions restrict his movements and activities. The story of the man who ran on blades ended with a life cut short for Riva Steenkamp and a long fall from fame for him. This response is AI generated for reference only. Story 5. Ratko Mladic was born on March 12, 1943, in the village of Bozanovice. At that time, this area was part of a country called the Independent State of Croatia. This state was controlled by a group called the Ustase, who worked with Nazi Germany and Fascist Italy during World War II. His father's name was Neda Mladic. Neda was a fighter with the Yugoslav partisans, a group that resisted the occupying forces. His mother's name was Stana. Ratko had an older sister, Milica, born in 1940, and a younger brother, Milivoj, born in 1944. When Ratko was 3 years old, his father was killed in a battle. Neda died on Ratko's third birthday, in 1945, while leading an attack against the Ustase. After her husband's death, Stana raised the 3 children by herself. The family lived in difficult conditions, and Stana worked hard to keep them together. When Ratko finished elementary school, he did not go straight to higher education. Instead, he found work in Sarajevo as a whitesmith. A whitesmith is a metal worker who polishes and finishes metal objects. He worked for a company called Predis. In 1961, Ratko decided to change his path. He entered the military industry school in Zemun, a town near Belgrade. This school prepared students for careers connected to the military. After that, he went on to the KOV Military Academy, and then to the Officers Academy. He studied hard and showed that he was capable. On September 27, 1965, he graduated from the Officers Academy. That same year, he joined the League of Communists of Yugoslavia. This was the ruling political party in the country at the time. He would remain a member until the party dissolved in 1990. Right after graduation, in November 1965, he began his first military post as an officer in Skopje, which is now in North Macedonia. He was the commander of his unit and was the youngest soldier in that unit. Over the next few years, he moved up through the ranks. In April 1968, he became a second lieutenant. In May 1970, he was given command of a platoon. By November 1974, he commanded a battalion, and later he led a brigade. In September 1976, he started higher military education at the Command and Staff Academy in Belgrade. He finished first in his class with a high grade of 9.57 out of 10. On December 25, 1980, he became a lieutenant colonel. On August 18, 1986, he became a colonel and was based in Stip. He completed another year of military education in September 1986. On January 31, 1989, he was promoted to head the education department of the 3rd Military District in Skopje. This was an administrative role where he oversaw training and education for soldiers in that district. On January 14, 1991, he received another promotion. He became the deputy commander of the Pristina Corps. This was in the Socialist Autonomous Province of Kosovo. At that time, there was growing tension between the Serb population and the Albanian majority in Kosovo. Mladic was now in a position of command in a region that was becoming unstable. He was married to a woman named Bosiljka. They had 2 children, a son named Darko and a daughter named Anna. His family life continued alongside his military career. By early 1991, Mladic was an experienced officer with a steady rise through the ranks. He had proven himself in his studies and in various posts. He was trusted by his superiors and had built a career that spanned more than 25 years in the Yugoslav People's Army. But the country around him was beginning to change. The political situation in Yugoslavia was becoming more fragile, and the military would soon be called to act in ways that went beyond training and routine duties. In June 1991, Mladic was serving as deputy commander in Pristina. That same month, tensions in Yugoslavia turned into open fighting in Croatia. The Yugoslav People's Army, which Mladic was part of, became involved in the conflict. Later that year, Mladic was given command of the Ninth Corps. He led this unit against Croatian forces in the region of Nin, which was the center of a self-declared Serb state called the Republic of Serbian Krajina. On October 4, 1991, he was promoted to Major General. Under his command, the army took part in operations aimed at cutting off parts of Croatia from the rest of the country. One operation was called Coast 91. The goal was to seize the coastline near Zadar and Sebenik. The fighting resulted in a stalemate, but Serb forces expanded their control over the hinterland. During this time, Mladic also helped militia forces in the siege of the town of Kijevo and in the Battle of Zadar. Civilians were displaced and towns were shelled. On April 24, 1992, Mladic was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel General. By then, Bosnia and Herzegovina had declared independence from Yugoslavia. Many Bosnian Serbs opposed this independence. On May 2, 1992, Mladic and other generals ordered a blockade of the city of Sarajevo. They shut off all roads into and out of the city. They also cut off water and electricity. This was the beginning of the siege of Sarajevo, which would last nearly 4 years. On May 9, 1992, Mladic became Chief of Staff and Deputy Commander of the 2nd Military District Headquarters in Sarajevo. The next day, he took full command of that district. On May 12, 1992, the Bosnian Serb parliament voted to create their own army, called the Army of Republika Srpska, or VRS. Mladic was appointed commander of the main staff of the VRS. He would hold this position until December 1996. At the same parliamentary session, the political leader Radovan Karadzic announced 6 strategic objectives. One objective was to separate Bosnian Serb territory from the other ethnic groups. Another was to create a corridor linking Serb lands. Mladic spoke at that session. He said that they could not cleanse or use a sieve to remove non-Serbs. Then he added, "People, that would be genocide." But despite saying those words, his forces would go on to carry out acts of genocide and ethnic cleansing. Once the VRS was formed, Mladic commanded approximately 80,000 troops. His forces began a campaign across Bosnia to take control of territory and remove Bosniak and Croat populations. In Sarajevo, the VRS placed artillery and sniper positions in the hills surrounding the city. From there, they fired shells into neighborhoods, markets, hospitals, and schools. Snipers targeted civilians walking in the streets, including children. The siege cut off food, medicine, and humanitarian aid. People in the city lived under constant bombardment for years. The method was systematic. The VRS used heavy weapons to destroy infrastructure and terrorize the population, with the goal of forcing the Bosnian government to surrender. In the spring of 1992, intercepted conversations showed Mladic's intent. In a recorded call on May 23, 1992, he told a Bosniak politician named Fikret Abdic that he was here for peace, but then threatened that if his demands were not met, he would order the shelling of entire cities. He said, "The whole of Bosnia will burn if I start to speak." He also said he would not leave Sarajevo alone as long as anyone's breathing in it. In another recorded conversation from the same day, Mladic said that his forces had moved to capture these valleys and clean up that Turkish rubble. He used the word Turks to refer to Bosniak Muslims. He expressed fear that refugees might be allowed to return and said they should see what we need to do and how to do it. Throughout 1992, 1993, and 1994, the VRS under Mladic's command carried out a pattern of attacks against civilians. Towns like Gorazda, Zipa, and Bihać were also shelled and besieged. The United Nations declared Srebrenica, Zipa, Gorazda, and other towns as safe areas in 1993, but the VRS continued to attack them. In July 1995, Mladic directed a major offensive against the safe area of Srebrenica. At the time, more than 40,000 Bosniaks had sought refuge in the town. VRS troops, under Mladic's command, overran the town on July 11th. Dutch peacekeeping troops stationed there were unable to stop the attack. After taking control, Mladic's forces separated the men and boys from the women, children, and elderly. The men and boys were taken to various locations, including warehouses, schools, and fields. Over the following days, they were systematically executed. More than 8,300 Bosniak men and boys were killed. Their bodies were buried in mass graves, and later many were dug up and moved to secondary graves to hide the evidence. The women, children, and elderly were loaded onto buses and expelled from the area. During the operation, Mladic was recorded on video visiting Srebrenica. He was seen giving a speech and handing out candy to local Serb residents, appearing relaxed while the killings were taking place nearby. Immediately after Srebrenica, Mladic's forces turned to the safe area of Zepa. In late July 1995, they overran Zepa as well. The pattern was similar: shelling, capture, and expulsion of the population. Thousands of Bosniaks were forced out, and many were killed or went missing. In early August 1995, the Croatian army launched a large offensive that retook Serb-held areas in Croatia. In response, the Bosnian Serb political leader Radovan Karadzic tried to remove Mladic from his command. On August 4th, Karadzic announced that Mladic was dismissed and that he would take personal command of the VRS. Karadzic blamed Mladic for losing 2 Serb-held towns, but Mladic refused to step down. He had strong support from the troops and the Bosnian Serb public. By August 11th, Karadzic was forced to cancel his order, and Mladic remained in command. In November 1995, the war in Bosnia ended with the Dayton Peace Agreement. But the crimes committed under Mladic's command did not end with the peace. In the years that followed, he remained the commander of the VRS until he was dismissed by the Bosnian Serb President Biljana Plavšić on November 8, 1996. By that time, an international court had already issued an indictment against him. He was accused of genocide, crimes against humanity, and violations of the laws of war. But for nearly 16 years after the war, he was not arrested. Instead, he went into hiding. During those years, the victims' families waited while Mladic remained free. After the war ended, the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, or ICTY, began issuing indictments against those responsible for war crimes. On July 24, 1995, while the war was still ongoing, the court indicted Mladic for genocide, crimes against humanity, and violations of the laws of war. On November 16, 1995, the charges were expanded to include the attack on Srebrenica. In July 1996, the court confirmed all charges and issued an international arrest warrant. But Mladic was not arrested. For years after the war, he continued to receive his military pension and was protected by Serb security forces. At first, he lived openly in Belgrade. After Slobodan Milosevic was arrested in 2001, Mladic went into hiding. But he was still sheltered by members of the army and security services. Throughout the 2000s, reports surfaced of Mladic being seen in various places. In March 2000, he was reportedly seen at a football match in Belgrade, entering through a VIP entrance with bodyguards. In 2004, NATO stated that he had visited his wartime bunker in Bosnia to celebrate a military holiday. In 2006, a Serbian military report was leaked showing that Mladic had been hidden in army facilities until June 2002, when a new law forced him to leave. During this time, the Serbian government faced increasing pressure to arrest him. The European Union made cooperation with the War Crimes Tribunal a condition for Serbia to move forward with membership talks. The United States government offered a reward of $5 million for information leading to his capture. In 2004, the International High Representative in Bosnia removed 58 officials from their jobs for helping war crimes suspects evade justice. In 2006, a Belgrade court indicted 10 people for aiding Mladic while he was in hiding. An investigation showed he had spent time in New Belgrade, a part of the capital. Despite these efforts, Mladic remained free. There were false reports of his arrest in February 2006, but these were quickly denied. In June 2009, a Bosnian television station broadcast videos showing Mladic in restaurants and apartments with his family. Serbian officials said the footage was old and that the last confirmed sighting was from 2002. In October 2010, Serbia increased the reward to 10 million euros. The hunt intensified. Serbian authorities began surveilling people connected to Mladic, including his relatives. For at least 2 months before the arrest, one of his cousins, Branislav Mladic, was under surveillance. On May 26, 2011, Serbian Special Police moved to arrest him. Early in the morning, about 24 officers in black uniforms and masks drove into the village of Lazarevo in northern Serbia. They arrived in 4 SUVs while most residents were still asleep. The officers went to 4 houses at the same time. Each house was owned by one of Mladic's relatives. At the house owned by his cousin Branislav, Mladic was inside. He had been awakened by pain and was about to go out into the yard for a walk. 4 officers jumped over the fence and broke into the house as he moved toward the door. They grabbed him, forced him to the floor, and demanded that he identify himself. He confirmed his identity and surrendered 2 pistols he was carrying. He was then taken to Belgrade. Serbian President Boris Tadic held a press conference to confirm that Mladic had been arrested. Mladic had been using a false name, Milorad Komatic, while in hiding. He was not wearing a beard or any disguise, but his appearance showed he had aged. One of his arms was paralyzed due to strokes he had suffered. After the arrest, Mladic appeared before a court in Belgrade. His lawyer argued that he was too ill to be extradited. Doctors examined him, and the court ruled on May 27th that he was fit to be extradited. On May 31st, 2011, he was transferred to The Hague, where the ICTY was located. His trial formally began on May 16th, 2012. The prosecution presented evidence over several years. They called witnesses who had survived the siege of Sarajevo and the massacres in Srebrenica. They entered into evidence the intercepted phone calls, military orders, and photographs. The prosecution argued that Mladic, as the commander of the VRS, had command responsibility for the actions of his troops, and that he had personally directed the campaigns of terror against civilians. On November 22, 2017, the trial chamber delivered its verdict. The judges found Mladic guilty on 10 counts. These included 1 count of genocide for the killings in Srebrenica. He was also found guilty of 5 counts of crimes against humanity, which included persecution, murder, and inhumane acts committed during the siege of Sarajevo and other parts of Bosnia. He was found guilty of 4 counts of violations of the laws or customs of war, which included murder, terror against civilians, and taking hostages. He was cleared of 1 additional count of genocide related to other municipalities in Bosnia. The court sentenced Mladic to life in prison. The judges determined that as the top military commander, he was responsible for both the siege of Sarajevo and the Srebrenica massacre. He had shown no remorse, and the scale of the crimes required the maximum sentence. Mladic appealed the conviction. The appeals process took several years. During this time, he remained in the detention unit in The Hague. In 2020, appeal hearings were held. On June 8, 2021, the appeals chamber rejected his final appeal. The judges confirmed the life sentence. Mladic was transferred to a prison facility in The Hague to serve his sentence. In the years following, reports emerged about his declining health. In 2025, it was reported that he was terminally ill. A request for his release on compassionate grounds was denied. The victims' families had waited for more than 2 decades to see Mladic held accountable. The survivors of Srebrenica and the siege of Sarajevo had attended the trial, testified, and watched as the verdict was read. After the final appeal was rejected, the legal proceedings against him came to an end. Ratko Mladic, once a commander of 80,000 troops, was now a convicted war criminal serving a life sentence, and he would remain in custody until his death. Story 6. Aaron Hernandez was born on November 6, 1989, in Bristol, Connecticut. He was the second son of Dennis Hernandez and Terry Valentine Hernandez. His older brother was named Dennis Jonathan Jr., and everyone called him DJ. The family lived on Greystone Avenue. The home was not a calm place. Aaron's parents fought often. They married in 1986, then divorced in 1991, then remarried in 1996. In 1999, they filed for bankruptcy. Aaron later said there was constant fighting in the house. Both parents were arrested at different times in their lives. Aaron's father pushed his sons to do well, especially in sports. But Dennis was also abusive. He would beat Aaron and DJ, sometimes for no clear reason, sometimes when he had been drinking, and sometimes because he thought the boys were not trying hard enough in school or sports. The brothers lived in fear of their father, but they also looked up to him. Once Aaron came to school with a bruise around his eye. His coach thought the injury came from Dennis hitting him. Another time Dennis punched Aaron's youth football coach after a disagreement about coaching methods. In public, Dennis tried to show a different side. He told people that he had once been in trouble with the police, but had turned his life around to become a good father and citizen. When Aaron was 16 years old, in January 2006, his father died from complications after hernia surgery. Aaron was deeply affected. According to his mother, he began rebelling against authority figures as a way to express his grief. People who knew him said he never fully recovered from losing his father. After Dennis died, Aaron grew apart from his mother. He moved in with his older cousin, Tanya Singleton. Around that time, the family learned that Terry had been having an affair with Tanya's husband, Jeff Cummings. The affair became public. Tanya and Jeff divorced, and Jeff moved in with Terry. This made Aaron very angry. While living with Tanya, Aaron became more involved in criminal activity. His brother DJ later said that Aaron was also sexually molested as a child. A teenage boy in his babysitter's house forced Aaron to perform oral sex on him starting when Aaron was 6 years old. This went on for several years. Aaron attended Bristol Central High School. He played football for the Bristol Rams, and he was also good at basketball and track. He started as a wide receiver and later played tight end and defensive end. In his senior year, he was named Connecticut's Gatorade Football Player of the Year. He set state records for receiving yards and touchdowns. He was considered one of the top tight end recruits in the country. During one game in 2006, Aaron took a blindside hit to the head and was knocked out cold. An ambulance took him off the field. Aaron was popular at school. He began dating Shayana Jenkins, a girl he had known since elementary school. He also started using marijuana heavily. He would smoke before school, before practices, and before games. He drank alcohol often as well. At first, Aaron committed to play football at the University of Connecticut, where his brother DJ was. But then he chose to play for the University of Florida under head coach Urban Meyer. Meyer and his assistants convinced Aaron's high school principal to let Aaron graduate more than a semester early, when he had just turned 17. The plan was for Aaron to move to Florida, join the team early, and learn the playbook. When Aaron arrived at Florida, he was not academically ready. He had to take remedial classes at a community college. Many of his teammates who came early did the same. Between practices, games, meetings, and workouts, Aaron put 40 to 60 hours a week into football almost all year. As a freshman in 2007, Aaron played in 13 games and started 3. He finished with 9 catches for 151 yards and 2 touchdowns. But in his sophomore year, he was benched for the season opener because he failed a drug test. Still, he started most of the rest of the games that season and helped the Gators win the 2009 BCS National Championship. In 2009, his junior year, Aaron led the team in receptions and won the John Mackey Award as the best tight end in the nation. He was named a first-team All-American. But off the field, there were problems. In April 2007, when Aaron was 17, he was at a restaurant in Gainesville with Tim Tebow. According to a police report, Aaron had 2 alcoholic drinks, then refused to pay the bill. When a manager tried to handle the situation, Aaron punched him in the side of the head and ruptured his eardrum. Police recommended charging Aaron with felony battery, but the case was settled out of court through a deferred prosecution agreement. Later that same year, in September 2007, a shooting happened in Gainesville. 2 men were wounded. A witness picked Aaron's photo out of a lineup, but no charges were filed at the time. Aaron spoke with an attorney and did not answer police questions. Aaron later said that he was high on drugs every time he took the field during college. Urban Meyer wanted to remove him from the team because of his marijuana use, but Tim Tebow asked Meyer to give Aaron another chance. After Aaron's junior year, Meyer told him he would not be welcome back for a 4th year. Aaron would have to enter the NFL draft. Aaron finished his college career with 111 receptions, 1,382 yards, and 12 touchdowns. In the months before the 2010 NFL draft, Aaron's draft stock dropped. Teams were worried about his off-field behavior, his size, and rumors about failed drug tests. Some teams took him off their draft boards completely. At the NFL Combine, Aaron admitted to teams that he had a history of marijuana use and had failed multiple drug tests in college. Later he said he had failed only 1 test. He wrote a letter to every team offering to be tested every other week during his rookie season. The New England Patriots selected Aaron in the 4th round of the 2010 draft. He was the 6th tight end taken. The Patriots also drafted Rob Gronkowski in the 2nd round. Aaron signed a 4-year contract. His signing bonus was smaller than usual because the Patriots wanted to protect themselves. The contract included roster and workout bonuses that Aaron could earn if he stayed out of trouble. Aaron started his rookie season as the youngest player on any active NFL roster. He and Gronkowski quickly became a powerful pair of tight ends. In 2010, Aaron caught 45 passes for 563 yards and 6 touchdowns. In 2011, he caught 79 passes for 910 yards and 7 touchdowns. He was voted to the Pro Bowl as an alternate. The Patriots went to Super Bowl 46 that season, but lost to the New York Giants. In August 2012, Aaron signed a 5-year contract extension worth nearly $40 million, with a signing bonus of $12.5 million, the largest signing bonus ever given to an NFL tight end at that time. During his years with the Patriots, Aaron kept connections to his hometown. He hired 2 friends from Bristol to work for him. Both had criminal records. One of them, Alexander Bradley, was his drug dealer. Aaron also kept a second apartment that his fiancée Shayana did not know about. He used it to store drugs and weapons. He would go there to smoke marijuana heavily. Teammates noticed changes in Aaron. He had few friends in the locker room. Some said he seemed to enjoy being an outcast. He was prone to mood swings and could become agitated quickly. Tom Brady once told Tim Tebow that he was trying to help Aaron, but called him a lot to handle. In early 2013, Aaron's behavior grew more troubled. He believed people were following him. He hired a bodyguard to stay with him all day. He installed a sophisticated surveillance system in his home. He approached Coach Bill Belichick and said he feared for his family's safety. He asked to be traded to a team on the other side of the country, but the request was denied. That February, Aaron and Alexander Bradley went to Florida. While there, Bradley was shot in the face and lost his right eye. Aaron was with him. Bradley survived but did not cooperate with police at first. Later, Bradley filed a lawsuit against Aaron, claiming Aaron had shot him. By the spring of 2013, Aaron's life was split between his professional football career and a world of drugs, weapons, and mounting threats. The Patriots were running out of patience, and some in the organization were already thinking about letting him go. By the spring of 2013, Aaron's life was split between his professional football career and a world of drugs, weapons, and mounting threats. The Patriots were running out of patience, and some in the organization were already thinking about letting him go. But before that decision could be made, Aaron became involved in 3 violent incidents that would define the rest of his life. The first of those incidents happened nearly a year earlier, in the summer of 2012. On the night of July 16, 2012, Aaron went to a nightclub called Cure in Boston's South End. He was there with his friend Alexander Bradley and a few other people. At the club, 2 men from Cape Verde, Daniel de Abreu, 29, and Safiro Furtado, 28, were also there with friends. According to witnesses, someone from Aaron's group accidentally spilled a drink on one of the men. Words were exchanged. Aaron and his group left the club shortly after. Security cameras inside the club showed Aaron was there for less than 10 minutes. Before leaving, he calmly posed for a photo with a fan. He walked out alone, not with Bradley as Bradley later claimed. Outside, Aaron got into a silver SUV. The SUV drove through the streets of Boston. Around 2 a.m., Daniel de Abreu and Safiro Furtado were driving home in a separate car with 3 other people inside. At a stoplight, the silver SUV pulled up next to their car. Someone inside the SUV yelled racial slurs at them. Then someone fired 5 shots into their car. Daniel and Safiro were hit. Daniel died at the scene. Safiro was taken to a hospital, but died there. The 3 other people in the car were wounded but survived. The silver SUV sped away. Police later identified the SUV as a vehicle registered to Aaron. They also pulled security footage from the club that showed Aaron was there that night. At the time, police thought it was a coincidence that Aaron happened to be at the club. They did not arrest him. No charges were filed immediately. The second violent incident happened in February 2013, a few months after Aaron signed his large contract extension. Aaron and Alexander Bradley went to Florida together. They visited a strip club in Miami. At the club, they spent a large amount of money, about $10,000. Aaron became worried about 2 men sitting across from them. He thought the men might be police officers from Boston who were investigating the double homicide from the previous summer. Bradley later said he told Aaron that the men were probably there because they were tracking the 2 of them. Later that night, Bradley said he woke up inside a car with Aaron pointing a gun at his face. Then Aaron shot him. The bullet went between Bradley's eyes. Aaron left Bradley lying in a parking lot. The next morning, police found Bradley bleeding on the ground. He survived, but he lost his right eye. Bradley did not cooperate with police at first. Instead, he wanted revenge. Over the next 3 months, he and Aaron exchanged more than 500 text messages. Some of the messages were death threats. Others were attempts at extortion. Bradley told Aaron he had weapons and men ready. Aaron's agent tried to settle the matter quietly, but no agreement was reached. Bradley demanded $5 million to keep quiet. Aaron offered $1.5 million. Bradley then asked for $2.5 million. Aaron stopped responding and went to see his lawyer. On June 13, 2013, Bradley filed a civil lawsuit against Aaron in a Florida federal court, seeking damages for the shooting. 4 days later, Bradley withdrew the lawsuit. The two men were trying to work out a settlement away from public view. The third and most direct crime took place in the early morning of June 17, 2013. Odin Lloyd was a 27-year-old semi-professional football player. He played for the Boston Bandits, a local team. He was dating Shania Jenkins, the sister of Aaron's fiancée Shayana Jenkins. Aaron and Odin had become friends because of the family connection. They often spent time together. On the evening of June 16, 2013, Odin Lloyd was in Boston with Shania and a friend. Aaron was also in Boston that night. Around midnight, Odin went to a bar called Rumor. Aaron was there too. Security cameras showed Aaron and Odin talking at the bar. Around 1 a.m., Odin left the bar with Aaron. They drove to Aaron's house in North Attleboro, Massachusetts. Aaron's house was about 30 miles south of Boston. Odin texted his sister during the car ride. One text said, "Do you know who I am with?" Another said, "NFL." A friend of Odin's also received a text around that time. The text said, "Did you see who I am with?" Aaron Hernandez. When they arrived at Aaron's house, Odin waited in the driveway. Aaron went inside. A short time later, Aaron came back out. He had a gun with him. Odin got into the driver's seat of his own car. Aaron got into the passenger seat. Odin drove them away from the house. Around 2:30 a.m., Odin stopped the car near an industrial park in North Attleboro. The area was called Industrial Drive. It was dark and quiet. Surveillance cameras from nearby buildings later captured what happened next. Aaron shot Odin Lloyd multiple times. Odin was hit in the back and chest. He was shot at close range. He died at the scene. Aaron left Odin's body on the ground. He drove away in a different vehicle, a silver Toyota 4Runner, that he had left near the industrial park earlier. The next morning, a jogger found Odin's body. Police were called. They identified Odin from his driver's license. They saw that he had been shot several times. That same morning, police began looking into Odin's background. They learned he had been dating Shania Jenkins. They also learned that Shania's sister was engaged to Aaron Hernandez. Police went to Aaron's house in North Attleboro. They spoke with him briefly. Aaron said he had been with Odin the night before, but claimed he had dropped Odin off at a rental car center and then went home. He told police he did not know what happened after that. Aaron then went to the Patriots Stadium in Foxborough, where he was scheduled to meet with coach Bill Belichick and team owner Robert Kraft. He assured them he had nothing to do with the shooting. The team later said that Aaron was barred from the stadium after that meeting. Over the next several days, police gathered evidence. They obtained surveillance video from Aaron's neighborhood that showed his car leaving and returning in the early morning hours. They found shell casings near Odin's body that matched ammunition Aaron had bought earlier. They also found that Aaron had returned home after the shooting, washed his car, and destroyed the security system inside his house. On June 18, 2013, police returned to Aaron's house with a search warrant. They found a car that had been rented for him, and inside the car they found a gun. They also found a box of ammunition that matched the shell casings at the crime scene. Aaron was not arrested that day, but the police now had enough evidence to connect him directly to the killing of Odin Lloyd. Meanwhile, Aaron's life was collapsing. The Patriots had decided they would cut him from the team if he was arrested on any charge related to Odin's death. His agent and lawyers were preparing for what was coming, and there was more to come. The police in Boston had not forgotten the double homicide from July 2012. With Aaron now under investigation for Odin's murder, they began looking again at the shooting outside the Cure nightclub. They also began looking into the shooting of Alexander Bradley in Florida. Aaron had committed 3 violent acts over the span of a year. Each one left victims. 2 men were dead from the first shooting. A third man was shot but survived. And now Odin Lloyd was dead. The police were about to bring all of these crimes into the open. On June 26, 2013, at approximately 8:45 a.m., state police and local officers arrived at Aaron Hernandez's house in North Attleboro. They had obtained an arrest warrant. Aaron was inside with his fiancée Shayana Jenkins and their young daughter. Officers took him into custody without incident. He was charged with first-degree murder in the death of Odin Lloyd, along with 5 gun-related charges. About 90 minutes after news of the arrest broke, the New England Patriots released Aaron from the team. A statement was issued saying the decision was made because Aaron's actions had hurt the team's reputation. Within days, the team's pro shop removed all of his merchandise. Thousands of his jerseys were exchanged by fans for other players' jerseys. The jerseys were destroyed. Endorsement deals with companies like Puma and Cytosport were terminated. The University of Florida removed his name and awards from its football facilities. His high school also removed his awards and returned them to his family. Aaron was held without bail. He pleaded not guilty to the murder charge on September 6, 2013. The prosecution built its case around physical evidence, surveillance footage, and witness testimony. The key pieces of evidence included shell casings found at the industrial park that matched ammunition Aaron had purchased, surveillance video showing his car traveling to and from the crime scene, and his own statements to police that were contradicted by the physical evidence. Prosecutors also presented testimony from friends of Odin Lloyd, who received text messages from Odin saying he was with Aaron in the hours before the shooting. The trial began on March 1, 2015, in Fall River, Massachusetts. The courtroom was filled with family members of both Aaron and Odin Lloyd. During the trial, the prosecution argued that Aaron had planned the killing and had carried it out with deliberate premeditation. The defense argued that the evidence was circumstantial and that Aaron was being targeted because of his fame. Aaron's lawyers pointed to 2 other men who had been present on the night of the shooting as possible suspects. The trial lasted several weeks. The jury heard from more than 130 witnesses. On April 15, 2015, after 5 days of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict. Aaron Hernandez was found guilty of first-degree murder. Under Massachusetts law, a first-degree murder conviction carries an automatic sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was also found guilty on 5 firearm charges. He was sentenced to life in prison and was transferred to the Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center, a maximum security prison in Lancaster, Massachusetts. While Aaron was in prison awaiting trial for Odin Lloyd's murder, investigators had not stopped working on the other cases. On May 15, 2014, Aaron was indicted for the July 2012 double homicide of Daniel D'Abreu and Safiro Furtado. He was also charged with armed assault and attempted murder for the shots fired at the other 3 people in the car. The case was built largely on the testimony of Alexander Bradley, the man Aaron had shot in Florida. Bradley had initially refused to cooperate with police, but after Aaron's arrest for Odin Lloyd's murder, Bradley agreed to testify. Security footage from the nightclub also placed Aaron at the scene shortly before the shooting. The trial for the double homicide began on March 1, 2017 in Boston. Aaron was already serving a life sentence for Odin Lloyd's murder. His defense attorney, Jose Baez, argued that Bradley was not credible. Baez pointed out that Bradley was a convicted drug dealer who had a financial motive to testify against Aaron. Baez also highlighted problems with the police investigation, including the fact that the victims' bodies had been left in their bullet-riddled car as it was towed from the scene, which violated proper procedure. The defense also presented security footage showing Aaron leaving the nightclub calmly and alone, which contradicted Bradley's version of events. On April 14, 2017, the jury delivered its verdict. Aaron Hernandez was found not guilty of the murders of Daniel de Abreu and Safiro Furtado. He was also found not guilty of the armed assault charges. The jury did find him guilty of one count of illegal possession of a handgun. Because he was already serving a life sentence for the murder of Odin Lloyd, this conviction added no additional time to his incarceration. 5 days later, on the morning of April 19, 2017, correction officers at Souza Baranowski Correctional Center conducted a routine check of Aaron's cell. He shared a two-person cell, but was alone at the time. Officers found him hanging from the window of his cell using bed sheets. They cut him down and attempted to revive him. He was taken to UMass Memorial Hospital in Leominster, where he was pronounced dead at 4:07 a.m. He was 27 years old. In the cell, investigators found 3 handwritten notes. One was addressed to his attorney, Jose Baez. The other 2 were addressed to his fiancée, Shayana Jenkins, and his 4-year-old daughter. A Bible was found open to John 3 verse 16. The same passage, John 3 verse 16, was written on his forehead in red ink. Shampoo had been poured on the floor, and cardboard was wedged under the cell door to make it difficult for someone to enter. Drawings in blood on the walls showed an unfinished pyramid and an all-seeing eye, with the word Illuminati written underneath. The medical examiner ruled the death a suicide by hanging. Because Aaron died while his appeal of the Odin Lloyd murder conviction was still pending, his lawyers filed a motion to vacate the conviction under a Massachusetts legal doctrine called abatement ab initio. Under this doctrine, if a criminal defendant dies before exhausting all appeals, the conviction is erased and the defendant is treated as if they had never been convicted. On May 9, 2017, a judge granted the motion. Aaron's conviction for Odin Lloyd's murder was vacated. The Bristol County District Attorney's Office appealed the decision. On March 13, 2019, the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court issued its ruling. The court reinstated Aaron's conviction for the murder of Odin Lloyd. The court also ruled that the doctrine of abatement ab initio was outdated and ended the practice going forward. Aaron's conviction was put back on the record. After Aaron's death, his family released his brain to researchers at Boston University. The researchers specialized in studying chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, a degenerative brain disease caused by repeated head trauma. In September 2017, the researchers announced that Aaron had been diagnosed with stage 3 CTE. This was one of the most severe cases ever seen in a person his age. The disease is linked to impulse control problems, aggression, paranoia, and mood swings. Shayana Jenkins and Aaron's daughter filed a lawsuit against the New England Patriots and the NFL. The lawsuit claimed that the team and the league were responsible for Aaron's death because his football career caused the brain damage that contributed to his behavior. The lawsuit was dismissed in February 2019 because the family had missed the deadline to opt out of a class action settlement between the NFL and former players. Odin Lloyd's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Aaron's estate. That case was settled out of court. The terms of the settlement were not made public. Aaron Hernandez's body was cremated, and his ashes were given to his family. A private funeral was held in his hometown of Bristol, Connecticut. Former teammates from the Florida Gators attended. The New England Patriots did not issue a statement. The life and crimes of Aaron Hernandez ended in a prison cell, leaving behind 2 families forever changed. The Lloyd family, who lost a son and brother, and the families of Daniel de Abreu and Safiro Furtado, who lost loved ones in a shooting that remained unresolved for years. Aaron's own family was left to raise his daughter without him, carrying the weight of everything that had happened. What began with a boy from Bristol who showed extraordinary talent on a football field ended with a man whose actions destroyed lives and whose own life ended in isolation, with a medical diagnosis that could not undo the harm he had caused.